Right now, as you listen, observatories across the globe are reporting a timing they did not expect. SWAN dims in one hemisphere as Atlas flares in another, separated by millions of kilometers, yet answering each other in minutes. The raw numbers landed first, blunt and cool, in the databases: dates, brightness curves, positional residuals, and then the image that won't leave technicians' monitors. A rhythm, a pulse, two wanderers losing shape together. If you're curious about the cosmos, hit that like button and share where you're watching from. Whether you're riding the subway in New York or settling into bed in Tokyo, that small click helps this quiet conversation reach the other stargazers awake tonight. It should be simple. Comets break near the sun, tails fray, ice sheds under heat. But the breakage we're seeing doesn't fit the usual pattern. SWAN's tail cleaves when no solar flare was recorded. Atlas breathes dust when gravity is steady. The telescopes log it again and again, and in that repetition the question grows: is this coincidence, or is there something else sketching a shape across empty space? And as we lean into that question, another emerges. If the void can move in ways we haven't mapped, what other fingers are shaping the paths of things that pass through it? The brightness data kept coming in, each night a little stranger than the last. An amateur array in Chile reported the same fading pattern at almost the exact hour that a team in South Africa recorded Atlas pulsing brighter, as if the two were answering each other across the dark. This isn't how comets behave. They are fragile, yes. They fracture under heat, yes, but never in a rhythm. Never in a call and response. And so astronomers began to wonder whether we are watching not random physics, but choreography, a dance written by a hand we cannot yet see. And the question deepens when you place the graphs side by side. SWAN dips, then Atlas climbs. SWAN brightens, Atlas shudders. Like waves meeting in a tide, their fates ripple together. What force could tie them, separated by such distance? Gravity is too steady, light is too slow, even the solar wind cannot reach in minutes. Something else is at work here, a thread invisible to every instrument, tugging both at once. It is tempting to dismiss it as coincidence. Science demands caution, but coincidence fades quickly when the pattern repeats night after night, telescope after telescope. By the time the European arrays confirmed the same timing, the whisper had grown into a murmur. Something unknown is interfering. It is a sentence no scientist enjoys saying, but it is the only one that fits. If space can shape events in ways we cannot measure, then how often has it done so before? How many visitors have been silenced before reaching our sight, broken apart not by the sun but by some unseen pressure in the void? And if these two wanderers are being undone now, does that silence serve to protect us, or to keep us from knowing what they carry with them? The tales of comets are like diaries, pages torn open by sunlight, spilling fragments of their journeys across space. SWAN should be leaving behind ordinary ice, carbon, faint chemicals glowing in ultraviolet. Atlas should be dusting our senses with familiar interstellar debris. Yet in their broken trails, something lingers that does not line up with the models. Traces that bend light at the wrong angles, particles that scatter more sharply than ice should allow. Subtle, yes, but persistent. Enough to make the teams run their simulations again and again, each time finding the same. The debris does not belong entirely to what we know. And so another question creeps in, quiet but insistent. What if this storm that breaks them is not simply random violence? What if it is selection? What if space itself, or something within it, is choosing what fragments may pass inward, and what must be erased before arriving? Astronomers are not quick to speak such thoughts aloud, yet they surface in the silence between data sessions. You can hear it in the way they phrase their reports: anomalous, inconsistent, unexplained. And you can almost feel the hesitation, as though even language must bend carefully around the possibility that the void is less passive than we have always believed. The public rarely hears these hesitations. They see the official graphs, the smoothed light curves, the cautious explanations. But here, beneath the polished reports, lies the raw unease. Swan and Atlas are not simply fading, they are being tested. Tested by what? No one yet knows. But the longer the rhythm persists, the harder it is to dismiss. Imagine standing under a night sky, looking up at what seems like stillness, while somewhere beyond sight, two fragile wanderers are breaking in unison, like twin voices faltering in the same measure of a song. Imagine knowing that every telescope on Earth is catching the same echo, yet none can find the source. That is where astronomy is tonight, caught between data and mystery, between silence and a question that refuses to go away. And here is where the real hook waits. What if Swan and Atlas are not the only ones? What if others have passed this way, unrecorded, unremembered, erased before we could learn from them? Could it be that the void itself has a kind of filter, allowing only certain stories through and silencing the rest? If that is so, then the survival of these two wanderers becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes a test of what knowledge humanity is allowed to see. The next layer of strangeness came not from the comets themselves, but from the way their disruptions echoed in our instruments. Sensitive photometers designed to catch the faintest shifts in starlight began recording fluctuations at the same moment Swan dimmed and Atlas flared. These were not random blips of static. They were pulses, measurable, repeating, arriving across different observatories with uncanny alignment. It is one thing for ice to fracture. It is another for that fracture to announce itself in the tools watching from hundreds of millions of kilometers away. What could possibly send a signal through absence? No solar flare was recorded, no magnetic storm strong enough to ripple through detectors worldwide. Yet the pattern landed anyway, like a whisper moving faster than the medium should allow. It suggested not only disturbance, but intent. And that is the hardest possibility to look at directly, that whatever is pushing against these two objects may not be blind. And this is where the community divides. Some argue it is nothing more than the fragility of comets combined with our eagerness to find meaning in noise. Others quietly note that noise does not repeat itself in rhythm, and chance rarely carves two bodies along mirrored lines. The truth sits uncomfortably between those poles. Perhaps it is coincidence, perhaps it is not. But the longer we watch, the more the balance tips toward design. This is where curiosity takes over. If something unknown is moving through space, tearing at Swan and Atlas as though to erase them, then why allow us to see it at all? Why let the instruments catch the flicker, the pulse, the echo? Unless, of course, the purpose is not to conceal but to reveal, to hint at forces we have not yet begun to name. And if that is the case, then what else lies waiting for us in the data? Already there are reports, faint, disputed but growing, of spectral lines that do not belong to any known composition of ice or dust. Lines too sharp, too precise, as though written deliberately into the tales now shedding away. Could it be that in their destruction these comets are leaving behind a message? Or is the message simply this: we do not control what enters our system. Something else does. It is a chilling thought, and yet an irresistible one. Every night the telescopes continue their vigil. Every morning the data sets grow thicker, and in between, the same pulse, the same mirrored collapse, the same unanswered question. The story refuses to end. And it is here that we are reminded of the scale of what we are looking at. These are not just icy rocks tumbling in darkness. Swan carries the scars of journeys past, sweeping gases that once hid in the depths of interstellar space. Atlas drags fragments of another star system entirely, carrying secrets older than our sun. Together they are more than curiosities, they are archives. And someone, or something, appears intent on editing those archives before they can arrive. This possibility reframes the entire discussion. we are no longer speaking only of comets, but of guardianship, of what knowledge is permitted to cross the threshold into human awareness. Imagine if each time a messenger approached, carrying dust, carrying code, carrying a fragment of another world, it was met by an unseen force and tested, allowed through only if it met some condition we do not yet understand. What would that mean for our place in the cosmos? Are we receivers of everything the universe offers, or only of what passes through the gate unseen? And so the speculation turns toward Mars, for it is along Mars's corridor that these wanderers must pass, and it is near Mars that the disturbances seem sharpest. Observers have noted that the faint magnetic environment around the red planet is behaving oddly in recent weeks, responding not to solar gusts, but to moments when SWAN fractures and Atlas pulses. Could Mars itself be resonating with the disruption? Could the planet act as a kind of amplifier, echoing what happens to these wanderers as they approach? If so, then the mystery expands. The unknown force may not only break comets, it may also reach into the quiet atmospheres of worlds. That thought leaves us in a different kind of unease. For if Mars feels the touch, might Earth feel it too when the timing arrives? Might our instruments, our satellites, even our own fragile environment echo the same unseen hand? These are questions without answers, questions that drift heavier each night. Yet they are the questions that keep astronomers awake, watching, logging, hoping to catch a glimpse of the storm before it swallows the evidence whole. And perhaps that is the most profound layer of all, that in chasing these two fragile wanderers, we are really chasing the outline of a force that may have always been there, moving silently, erasing quietly, shaping paths before we ever thought to notice. SWAN and Atlas may not survive their journey inward, but in their unraveling, they may be teaching us the most important lesson yet, that the void itself is not silent and perhaps never was. And if the void is not silent, then perhaps it has always been speaking, only in a language too subtle for us to notice until now. That is the possibility the data whispers each night as telescopes catch the faint glimmers of disruption. A slow code written in light and shadow. When SWAN fractures, when Atlas brightens, the pattern is not chaos but cadence. A cadence that seems almost deliberate, as though some rhythm older than planets is pressing itself onto these fragile visitors. Astronomers know better than most how dangerous it is to anthropomorphize the cosmos. To say the universe chooses or wants is to step beyond science into imagination. And yet, how else can one describe what is happening when no natural process explains the symmetry? What words can capture the strangeness of two wanderers unraveling in parallel, their fates woven like threads across a loom we cannot see? Already conversations are shifting. Where once the focus was on simple survival, would Atlas hold together? Would SWAN brighten again? Now the talk is of forces unnamed, of agents invisible, of cosmic tests and filters. Some frame it as the action of dark matter, not in its usual vast halo, but in local waves we have never charted. Others whisper of interstellar magnetic storms, flowing like rivers between galaxies, brushing against our system in brief but violent touches. Still others imagine what cannot be modelled, that perhaps intelligence resides in the void, guiding what arrives and what does not. Speculation is easy, proof is not. And so each night the telescopes continue, stacking exposures, collecting spectra, measuring brightness. Each day the data is sifted, compared, aligned. And each time the same ghostly rhythm appears, unyielding, as though mocking our attempts to explain it away. But here is where the story bends again. For the closer SWAN and Atlas drift toward Mars's orbital path, the sharper the disturbances become. It is not just their tails fraying now, but their comi flickering like candles in shifting wind. The plumes rise, then collapse, then rise again, not in hours or days, but sometimes in mere minutes. And the more erratic their shapes grow, the more the rhythm itself seems to tighten, as though some unseen conductor is drawing the tempo higher. This is when astronomers begin to ask the questions out loud. Why would an invisible force care about fragile wanderers of ice and dust? Why push them apart? Why fracture them in tandem? Unless the point is not the comets themselves, but what they carry. For every fragment of dust that drifts from SWAN or Atlas carries within it a history of chemicals, of isotopes, of environments never touched by Earth. If those fragments arrive here intact, they would whisper secrets older than our star, messages from before our system even formed. Perhaps that is exactly what must not be allowed. And so, in the quiet of late-night observatories, another thought arises. What if this is less an act of erasure and more an act of censorship? What if, hidden in the debris, in the ratios of isotopes or the shapes of crystals, lies knowledge not meant for us? If so, then the breaking of SWAN and Atlas is not random violence but careful editing, a kind of redaction written across the sky. It is here that Mars returns to the center of the discussion, for its orbit is where these two must cross, and its thin atmosphere may be the stage on which their fragments finally scatter. Already some reports hint at unusual fluctuations in Mars's ionosphere, fluctuations that align not with solar events, but with moments when SWAN and Atlas convulse. Could Mars itself be resonating with the disruption, serving as both witness and participant in this unfolding drama? If so, then the mystery grows deeper still. For if Mars feels the echo, then Earth may not be immune when the time comes. The invisible hand that breaks comets may also brush against the edges of our own world. Perhaps it already has, leaving traces we mistook for ordinary weather in space. Perhaps the same unseen storm that now unravels SWAN and Atlas has shaped the destinies of countless other wanderers before them, silencing their messages before they could arrive. And so we are left with a question that may be larger than the comets themselves. Are we watching two icy travelers unravel? Or are we watching the boundary of human knowledge itself being drawn, enforced by something beyond our sight? If the latter, then the fate of SWAN and Atlas is not just a curiosity, but a warning, a reminder that the universe does not yield all of its secrets willingly, and that sometimes silence is imposed. The silence between observations has become its own kind of message. Each time the data pauses, each time a telescope blinks into daylight or clouds veil the view, there lingers the sense that something important is happening just beyond our sight, something we may never catch in full. And yet when the skies clear, the rhythm is waiting, as though it never stopped. SWAN phrase, Atlas brightens, the pulse repeats. What force in the cosmos moves with such patience, steady and unseen, across weeks and months? Astronomers compare notes, searching for cracks in the pattern. Perhaps the data was corrupted, perhaps calibration failed, but the records line up too neatly. Different hemispheres, different instruments, same hours, same echoes. The possibility of error fades with each new confirmation, and in its place grows a quiet unease. What we are watching is not an accident. That realization carries weight, heavier than many are willing to admit. For if the disruption is deliberate, then it implies agency. And agency implies purpose. So the questions multiply. What purpose could there be in shattering comets? Why erase their secrets before they reach us? And most unsettling of all, why show us the erasure instead of hiding it completely? It is almost as though the void itself wants us to notice, but only notice, never understand. To see the edges of the storm, but not its center. To witness the test, but never meet the tester. Meanwhile, the comets continue their unraveling. SWAN, once luminous with its emerald glow, now trails ragged sheets of gas like torn fabric across the dark. Atlas, carrying the scars of its interstellar origin, now coughs bursts of dust into the black, bursts that fade too quickly to trace. Both objects grow weaker, dimmer, and yet they cling to existence, fighting a battle against an enemy no one can name. And as they weaken, the rhythm sharpens. Pulses that once spanned hours now seem to compress into tighter intervals. Like a drumbeat closing in, the unseen hand presses harder as Mars draws nearer. If the comets survive to cross its orbit, they will do so scarred, reduced, stripped of much of what they once carried. And perhaps that is the point. But what if survival itself is the test? What if the void allows only the strongest fragments to pass through, those able to resist the pressure? Then what reaches us is not the full story, but a filtered version censored by resilience. In that case, every grain of dust that touches Earth's atmosphere would be both treasure and warning, a survivor of a trial we barely understand. The thought leaves astronomers uneasy. They are trained to measure, not to imagine. Yet even in their caution, speculation seeps through. Could dark matter itself ripple in local currents, invisible rivers that shred fragile travelers? Could unseen magnetic corridors weave through the solar system, shepherding some bodies inward while tearing others apart? Could there be forces older than stars woven into the fabric of space-time itself, choosing what stories reach us? Every theory sounds improbable, and yet the data demands explanation. And so the search widens. Instruments designed to watch pulsars are repurposed, hoping to catch echoes in radio waves. Detectors meant for solar wind are scrutinized for patterns. Even seismic monitors on Earth are compared, in case the unseen storm leaves a fingerprint here, faint but detectable. Nothing conclusive emerges, but the hunger for answers grows. Because beneath all the theories, one thought persists. If something unknown is interfering with SWAN and Atlas, then this is not an isolated event. It could be a glimpse of a larger truth, one that stretches back through every age of astronomy. How many messengers never arrived because they were silenced before we could know them? How many comets were broken? How many fragments erased before history ever recorded them? It is almost unbearable to consider that our record of the cosmos is incomplete, not because we lacked the tools, but because someone, or something, decided what would be allowed through. And so, SWAN and Atlas drift on, unraveling, glowing faintly against the night. They are fragile, yes, but they are also stubborn. Even as they fracture, even as pieces break away, they continue their journey. They continue to resist. And perhaps that resistance itself is the lesson, that survival is not guaranteed, that knowledge comes at a cost, that even in silence the universe is telling us something we may not yet be ready to hear. And as the fragments scatter, the question that refuses to leave is this: are we truly witnessing destruction, or are we watching transformation? For every fracture that robs SWAN of its brightness leaves behind dust that glows faintly in ultraviolet, dust that whispers of the chemicals locked within, and every burst from Atlas sends out trails that shimmer oddly, bending light more sharply than expected, as though announcing that what survives is not entirely ordinary. It is strange to think that in their unraveling, they may be revealing more than they would have if they had stayed whole. Like books torn apart, their pages flying, the fragments carry secrets farther and wider than the intact volume ever could. Perhaps this is not censorship after all. Perhaps it is dissemination, but of a kind we cannot yet interpret. And that interpretation matters. Because if the breaking is meant to scatter knowledge, then every telescope capturing those faint dust veils is already reading a message, even if we do not yet know the language. The curves, the colors, the rhythms, all of it could be data encoded in chaos. The destruction could be signal, but that possibility carries its own unease. For who or what would choose destruction as a means of communication? Why not clarity? Why not a deliberate beacon, sharp and undeniable? Unless clarity is not the point, unless confusion itself is the test, only those willing to watch long enough, patiently enough, will piece together meaning. In that way, the cosmos does not hand out answers, it demands persistence. And astronomers have little choice but to persist. The instruments continue their vigil, recording every flicker, every flare, every collapse. Data sets swell into terabytes, patterns traced across sleepless nights, and always the same question sits at the edge of the graphs. Is this noise, or is it a message hidden in the noise? The more the discussion turns, the more Mars becomes central, for soon, very soon, the paths of SWAN and Atlas will draw them close to the planet's orbit. If the disruptions are trials, then the crossing of Mars may be the ultimate test. Will they survive the passage? Will they shatter entirely? Or will something unseen shift again, altering their course in ways no prediction can match? Even now, whispers suggest that Mars is already involved. Instruments watching its thin ionosphere note subtle changes, ripples that align with cometary disruptions rather than solar activity. It is as though Mars itself is answering, vibrating faintly each time the rhythm strikes SWAN or Atlas. If true, then the planet is no passive bystander. It is participant, resonator, amplifier, and that possibility unlocks a deeper fear. If planets can resonate with the storm, then Earth is not exempt. The same invisible hand that fractures comets could brush against our own world, too faint for us to notice until the right alignment makes it plain. Perhaps it already has, in ways we misread as ordinary fluctuations in our magnetic shield or sudden bursts of aurora that seemed without cause. If the unseen can reach across millions of kilometers to tug fragile wanderers in tandem, what else can it touch? Satellites, stations, even the fragile balance of our atmosphere. The thought is unsettling but unavoidable. We live not in a void of silence, but in a medium alive with forces we cannot yet map. And so the narrative sharpens again. SWAN and Atlas are not curiosities, not mere comets. They are canaries in the coal mine of space, frail witnesses to a storm that sweeps wider than we can imagine. Their unraveling is both warning and revelation, showing us that the cosmos is less empty than we believed and more complex than we are ready to admit. But perhaps that is the role of wanderers, to arrive fragile, to endure briefly, to break in ways that leave us asking better questions than before. They may not survive intact, but their story will. And in the end, that story may prove more enduring than any fragment of dust left drifting in the void. And yet, for all the unease, there is wonder too, because even in their unraveling, SWAN and Atlas shine. Their dust streams catch sunlight and scatter it into halos that stretch across millions of kilometers, painting faint veils against the stars. Observers describe the sight as haunting. Fragile arcs of green and gold, whispering across the darkness like signals too vast to decipher. It is easy, staring at those faint glows, to imagine they are not accidents of ice and rock, but sentences written in light, waiting for someone patient enough to read them. The more they scatter, the more intricate the patterns become. Instruments trace spirals, fans, sudden bursts, all laid down in repeating intervals. They look less like chaos and more like music, the kind of music you can only hear with your eyes. Astronomers debate whether these rhythms are random or guided, but deep down, the rhythm itself feels undeniable, as though the comets are caught in a song larger than themselves, played on an instrument we cannot see. And if there is music, then there may be meaning. But whose song is it? The sun's, reaching out in a way we do not yet understand, or some other voice, older, quieter, using fragile wanderers as its instrument? These are not questions that fit neatly into the language of journals or reports, but they are questions that surface in every late-night session when data streams flicker across the screen. Mars looms larger each day, not only as a waypoint in their journey, but as a witness. Its orbit is the stage toward which all of this motion converges. Already, instruments have caught its faint shimmer changing at the very moments SWAN and Atlas convulse. Scientists hesitate to say the word connection, but the pattern is difficult to ignore. If Mars is resonating with their rhythm, then perhaps the invisible storm is not confined to space between, but tied into the very planets themselves. That idea is unsettling in its implications, because if Mars can echo the disruption, then Earth could as well. Our own fragile magnetosphere, our atmosphere, even our oceans might hum in resonance if the rhythm grows strong enough. And what would that mean for us? Could we mistake such resonance for ordinary weather, or auroras, or minor storms in space, when in fact it is part of the same hidden cadence unraveling comets millions of kilometers away? Every piece of data feeds the unease. SWAN fractures again, shedding sheets of dust like torn pages. Atlas pulses brighter, then dims, then pulses again, as though gasping under invisible pressure. Each moment sharpens the sense that what we are watching is not a random collapse, but a conversation, though one-sided, as if the cosmos is speaking and the comets are struggling to reply. And so speculation turns darker. What if the unseen storm is not natural at all? What if it is artificial, a deliberate mechanism seeded into the void long before humanity ever looked up? A filter designed to intercept wanderers before they reach worlds like ours, stripping them of knowledge or silencing them entirely. It sounds like science fiction, and yet, in the face of unexplained rhythm and synchronized destruction, the line between fiction and possibility blurs. And here lies the paradox. The more the comets unravel, the less we understand, and yet the more compelled we are to watch. Every night draws more eyes to the data, more instruments to the sky, more minds to the question. Perhaps that is the real power of this moment. Not the survival or destruction of SWAN and Atlas, but the way their fragile dance forces us to confront the possibility that the void is not empty, not neutral, not silent. The deeper truth may be that space has always been alive with rhythms we ignored. These two wanderers, fragile though they are, have simply tuned us to the right frequency at last. And once tuned, we may never again hear silence in the same way. The thought that space itself could be alive with hidden rhythms unsettles and fascinates in equal measure. For centuries we pictured the void as a backdrop, silent, indifferent, merely the stage on which stars and planets move. But what if the stage itself is in motion? What if the canvas ripples with patterns we have only just begun to glimpse? SWAN and Atlas, fragile wanderers both, might be the brushes painting those ripples into visibility. The data suggests as much. Each time SWAN fractures, the fragments scatter in arcs that seem less like debris and more like signals, fan-shaped, repeating, consistent enough to make even cautious astronomers raise their eyebrows. Atlas, by contrast, flares unpredictably, sudden bursts of light that fade before models can catch them. Yet even that unpredictability follows the same clock as SWAN's collapse. Random events rarely move in lockstep. Something unseen is conducting them both. And if that is true, then the conductor may not be finished. Mars lies ahead, a gravitational corridor they cannot avoid. The timing is ominous. Just as the comets weaken, they are drawn toward a planet that seems to echo their every convulsion. Will Mars amplify their unraveling, shattering them completely? Or will the planet act as a shield, absorbing some of the unseen pressure? No one can say. But already eyes are turning toward the red planet, waiting to see if its thin atmosphere and quiet magnetism will betray the hand shaping these wanderers' fate. The silence between answers is filled with questions. Why now? Why these two? Thousands of comets pass through the solar system over centuries, most ignored, most forgotten. Why should Swan and Atlas be bound together in this strange duet of collapse? If the cosmos is censoring them, then what secret is so dangerous it must be destroyed before it arrives? If the cosmos is signaling through them, then what message is so urgent it requires breaking them apart to make it visible? Even cautious voices admit this. We are in uncharted territory. The familiar laws of physics are not broken, but they are strained, stretched to their limits by phenomena that slip through the cracks. Gravity explains some of it. Solar pressure explains some of it, but not the rhythm, not the mirrored timing, not the whispers that ride through instruments when no source can be found. And it is not just astronomers who feel it. Even those far from telescopes sense a shift, auroras blooming without storms, instruments flickering with static that refuses to map to ordinary causes. The disruptions may be faint, but they touch more than the comets. They may already be touching us. That thought lingers in the background of every report, every press release carefully worded to sound calm. To admit otherwise would be to acknowledge that our world is part of the same test. And perhaps it is. Perhaps every planet is. Perhaps Swan and Atlas are only the latest participants in a trial that has been unfolding for eons, a trial whose rules we have never understood. And here is the quietest, most unsettling hook. If this is a test, then who or what is watching the results? Because tests imply an observer, someone to measure, someone to decide. And whether that observer is a force of nature, a structure woven into the universe itself, or something more deliberate, the fact remains that Swan and Atlas are being measured. Their survival, or their collapse, is not just an accident, but part of a pattern. And through them, we too may be measured, caught in the echo of forces we cannot yet name. The comets drift on, weaker with each day, yet still carrying fragments of mystery in their unraveling veils. And we, watching, find ourselves drawn deeper into the rhythm, unable to look away, waiting for the next fracture, the next pulse, the next whisper from the dark. And still, the comets resist. Against pressure no one can measure, against a rhythm no one can name, they hold fragments of themselves together. It is easy to forget how fragile they are, loose bundles of ice and dust, stitched by gravity so weak a human step would scatter them. Yet somehow they persist. Pieces fall away, yes, but cores remain, drifting stubbornly toward the inner system. There is a kind of defiance in their survival, as though whatever unseen storm seeks to erase them has not yet fully succeeded. That defiance may be the reason so many eyes are watching now. Scientists rarely speak of comets with such intensity. They are usually catalogued, observed, and then forgotten once they fade. But Swan and Atlas are different. Their story does not fade. It grows sharper. Each night's data adds another twist, another confirmation that what we are seeing is not ordinary. And in that persistence, the comets themselves seem to demand attention, pulling our curiosity closer with every fractured tail. What if that is part of the pattern too? Not only to test their survival, but to test our persistence in watching. If so, then perhaps the true subject of this unfolding story is not the comets at all, but us. Humanity, struggling to interpret signals from a universe that refuses to reveal its whole hand. Mars remains the looming milestone. Each calculation shows the timing tightening. In weeks, Swan and Atlas will cross its orbital path, and when they do, the question becomes unavoidable. Will the unseen storm shatter them entirely at the threshold, or will fragments survive the crossing, carrying traces into the inner system, into the reach of Earth itself? Every telescope waits for that answer. Meanwhile, subtler hints appear. Instruments designed for planetary monitoring record fluctuations that mirror the comet's convulsions. Magnetic lines that should remain steady twitch at the same moment's brightness curves dip. It is not proof, but it is echo, another layer of resonance in a growing chorus. And once you hear resonance, it is difficult to pretend silence. The deeper implication gnaws at the edges of thought. If resonance ties comets and planets together, then perhaps nothing in the system stands apart. Perhaps all are woven into the same field, the same rhythm, the same trial. If so, then Earth is not only observer, but participant. We are inside the test, even as we try to measure it from afar. And here is the unsettling possibility. What if the outcome has already been decided? What if the storm that unravels Swan and Atlas is not a spontaneous event, but part of a cycle, repeating across ages, shaping the fate of every traveler that dares approach? If that is true, then our role is not to prevent it, but to recognize it, to finally see the rhythm for what it is, even if we cannot change it. The fragments drifting now may be the last traces we receive before the comets cross Mars's corridor. They are faint, scattering across the void, but they carry signatures nonetheless. Some suggest isotopes out of balance. Others hint at structures in the dust that do not belong to ordinary ice. Each clue is faint, fragile, easy to dismiss. Yet taken together, they whisper that these wanderers carried secrets, and that their unraveling may not fully erase them. And perhaps that is the final irony. In attempting to destroy, the storm may reveal. In pressing to silence, it may amplify. For destruction is never clean. It leaves traces, echoes, fragments. And sometimes, fragments are enough to change everything. So we watch and wait. Swan drifts on, trailing veils that look more like torn banners than cometary tales. Atlas pulses again, dimming, brightening, like a heartbeat in the dark. Together they carry the rhythm forward, step by fragile step, into the waiting arms of Mars's orbit. And somewhere in that rhythm, perhaps, lies the first note of a truth we are not yet ready to hear. As the days pass, the rhythm sharpens. What once seemed like coincidence now feels like inevitability. Swan fractures, Atlas flares. The cycle repeats, tighter and tighter, like a drumbeat closing in. Each new observation confirms the pattern, and each confirmation presses the same quiet thought. This is not random. Something is guiding the collapse. The comets themselves are growing weaker. Swan's emerald glow, once bright and smooth, is now ragged, interrupted by sudden gaps where material has torn away. Atlas, carrying scars of earlier fractures, surges with bursts of brightness that last only minutes before fading again. Their struggle is not graceful, it is desperate, and yet, in that desperation, there is meaning. The very fact that they survive at all, piece by piece, speaks to a resilience that should not be possible. Astronomers note it carefully, plotting each flare, each fracture. The graphs look less like random data and more like a pulse, a heartbeat scrawled across the canvas of the sky. And with every beat comes the same unsettling realization: we may not be the audience. These signals may not be for us at all. They may be part of a conversation playing out across scales we can barely perceive, with Swan and Atlas caught as messengers or sacrifices in a dialogue we have stumbled upon by accident. And if we have stumbled into that conversation, then what role do we play? Observers, participants, or simply eavesdroppers on a story too vast to matter that we are listening? The question lingers in the silence between data points, in the pauses when the comets drift out of sight and we wait for them to return again. Mars looms closer each night. Its orbit is the threshold, the gate the comets must cross. And as that crossing nears, the disturbances intensify. Instruments record not only brightness changes, but subtle ripples in surrounding space. Faint deviations in background starlight, as though something unseen is bending the corridor around them. No one can yet say what causes it. Gravitational lensing, magnetic distortion, or something else entirely, something we have not named. The timing is too precise to ignore. Swan fractures, Mars trembles faintly. Atlas pulses, Mars's thin atmosphere flickers. Coincidence grows thinner with every alignment, and so speculation grows bolder. Perhaps the red planet is not merely a stage, but a node in the network, a place where the unseen rhythm reveals itself more strongly. If so, then when the comets cross its orbit, the echoes may ring louder than ever before. But here lies the deeper unease. If Mars resonates, then Earth may as well. And if Earth resonates, then our own fragile systems, satellites, instruments, even the delicate balance of our atmosphere, could be drawn into the same hidden song. We might already be feeling the first faint touches, disguised as noise, as unexplained anomalies tucked away in reports that never made headlines. The thought is difficult to hold, but impossible to dismiss. We live inside a system we barely understand, a system that may be shaped by forces we have never mapped. To realize this is both humbling and terrifying, for it means that what happens to comets at the edge of vision may not stay at the edge. It may ripple inward, all the way to us. And perhaps that is the true warning in SWAN and Atlas. Not simply that they are unraveling, but that their unraveling foreshadows something larger, something moving through the solar system itself. Whether that something is a storm of dark matter, a wave of magnetic resonance, or a filter built into the fabric of the void, the message is the same. We are not as isolated, not as safe, not as separate from cosmic forces as we once believed. The comets drift on, fragile but unyielding, dragging their mysteries closer with each orbit. And with them comes a growing anticipation, a waiting that feels less like observation and more like preparation. For when they cross Mars's path, when the rhythm reaches its crescendo, we will finally see whether survival is possible, or whether silence will claim them completely. Each night, as telescopes gather their faint light, the sense of convergence grows stronger. SWAN's tail stretches thin, torn into translucent banners that shimmer like threads pulled too far. Atlas brightens in spasms, then collapses again into silence, as though struggling to breathe in a vacuum that will not let it rest. Both seem to answer each other across distance, two voices in a dialogue we cannot decode. The strange part is not the breaking. Comets break all the time. The strange part is the synchronicity. It is as if both wanderers are tuned to the same metronome, each responding not only to the sun or to gravity, but to some deeper rhythm carried through the void itself. A rhythm we were never meant to hear, but which they cannot help but follow. And with every cycle of fracture and flare, another layer of mystery emerges. Fragments drifting away from SWAN appear to bend slightly, as if nudged by an unseen current. Dust shedding from Atlas seems to shimmer longer than physics should allow, glowing faintly before fading. None of it fits comfortably within the models. None of it can be dismissed. It is this persistence of anomaly that wears on astronomers most. If it were a single event, it could be explained away as error. But anomaly upon anomaly becomes a pattern, and patterns demand explanation. The more the comets unravel, the more the universe insists that something larger is unfolding just beyond our grasp. And always, Mars waits. The red planet has never seemed so much like a witness, standing in its silent orbit, waiting for the approach of these unraveling wanderers. Some suggest it is more than witness, that its faint atmospheric flickers and magnetic tremors are signs of resonance, the planet itself humming in sympathy with the hidden storm. If true, then Mars may not be neutral ground at all. It may be an amplifier, a place where the unseen grows louder. The possibility is unsettling, for if Mars can amplify the storm, then so can Earth. And if resonance can spread across worlds, then no planet is safe from the rhythm that now tears at SWAN and Atlas. We may already be feeling it, in unexplained magnetic pulses, in sudden bursts of aurora without cause, in data anomalies dismissed as noise. Perhaps these are not accidents, but the first whispers of the same hidden hand. What does it mean if space itself is alive with these rhythms? If comets are not just wanderers, but instruments caught in a symphony we cannot yet hear in full? Some argue that this is not destruction at all, but communication, that the comets are being played. They're unraveling the song of forces older than stars. And if that is true, then the dust veils and brightness pulses are not warnings of doom, but messages scattered across the void, waiting for us to listen. But if it is communication, then why does it come clothed in chaos? Why must the song destroy the instrument to be heard? Unless destruction is part of the meaning, a demonstration that nothing endures unchanged, that survival is always fleeting, that the story lies not in permanence, but in the fragments left behind. The thought is both haunting and oddly comforting, because fragments can travel farther than intact bodies. Dust can drift where cores cannot. Perhaps the breaking of SWAN and Atlas is not an end, but a beginning, the scattering of seeds across the system, seeds that may tell their story long after the comets themselves are gone. And so we watch, caught between dread and wonder. The telescopes collect their data, the charts grow denser, the anomalies sharper. Every night adds another verse to the unfolding song, another beat in the hidden rhythm. And as the comets approach Mars, we find ourselves waiting for the crescendo, the moment when the unseen either silences them completely or allows fragments to pass, carrying the truth with them into the inner system. Whatever happens at that crossing will not only decide the fate of SWAN and Atlas, it may decide how we see the cosmos itself, as silent backdrop or as something alive, restless and watching. The air of anticipation thickens with each observation. Astronomers admit, even quietly among themselves, that they have never seen two wanderers behave this way. SWAN's tail no longer behaves like dust alone. It pulses in luminous sheets that ripple outward like shockwaves. Atlas, battered though it is, still manages sudden flares of brilliance, defiant, almost theatrical, before slipping back into dim silence. Both carry the same rhythm, both echo the same invisible hand, and the closer they draw to Mars, the sharper that rhythm becomes. The intervals between pulses shorten, the brightness changes grow more abrupt. It is as though the unseen force grows impatient, pressing harder as the comets approach the threshold of the red planet's orbit. To some, it feels like a test nearing its conclusion. To others, it feels like a warning. Either way, no one can ignore that something climactic is building. Speculation has spread far beyond astronomy circles. Physicists, planetary scientists, even those who study magnetic fields and plasma flows have all been drawn into the discussion. Some argue that the disturbances are a product of dark matter, rare currents of invisible mass flowing through the system. Others suggest it could be relic fields from ancient stellar events, ripples frozen into space-time itself. More daring voices whisper of artificiality, that what we are seeing may be the residue of design, a filter or mechanism woven into the cosmos to shape what stories reach us. But here lies the challenge. All of these theories are untestable, at least with the data we hold now, and so the waiting continues. The only certainty is that SWAN and Atlas will pass near Mars, and in that passage, the truth may reveal itself in ways no model can predict. Mars itself is already changing, or at least appearing to. Instruments monitoring its thin atmosphere note fluctuations out of rhythm with solar wind. Magnetic readings twitch faintly when the comets convulse. These could be coincidences, data noise, simple errors in interpretation, but each new report makes coincidence less convincing. It is as though Mars is listening, vibrating faintly in response to the same rhythm unraveling SWAN and Atlas. If that is true, then the implications are profound, because if Mars can resonate, so can Earth. And if resonance spreads across planets, then the entire solar system is part of the same hidden song. We may not just be observers to the storm, we may be inside it, participants whether we choose or not. That possibility lingers like a shadow over every observation. for what happens to Swan and Atlas could foreshadow what awaits us. If the storm silences them completely at the threshold of Mars, then perhaps no wanderer escapes its reach. But if fragments endure, if pieces scatter into the inner system, then perhaps there is a loophole, a way to survive even the unseen hand. The thought is both terrifying and hopeful. Terrifying because it means we may live at the mercy of forces beyond our comprehension. Hopeful because even fragile wanderers like Swan and Atlas might endure long enough to tell their story. And if they can, perhaps we can too. The more their tales scatter, the more beautiful the night skies become for those watching. Sheets of green, streaks of white, bursts of faint gold, all glowing softly against the black. They are fragile, yes, but they are luminous in their fragility. And there is something almost deliberate about it, as though in breaking they are choosing to be seen, refusing to vanish quietly. Perhaps that is the lesson hidden in their struggle, that even in collapse there is revelation, that even in destruction meaning can survive. Swan and Atlas may not reach us whole, but they may reach us nonetheless, in fragments scattered like breadcrumbs through the solar wind. And perhaps those fragments are enough. The silence between their pulses grows shorter still. Mars is near, the stage is set, and in the coming nights we will see whether the story ends in silence or in echoes that carry across the void. The red planet now dominates the calculations. Charts fill with intersecting paths, arcs that show Swan and Atlas narrowing toward the same orbital corridor. Even the most cautious voices admit it. Whatever is happening, it will reach a turning point as they cross Mars's domain. Some expect silence, a sudden end to both wanderers. Others expect fragmentation so total that nothing recognizable will remain. A few, more hopeful, suggest that fragments will endure, enough to carry whispers of the truth farther inward. But the data refuses to wait for the crossing. Already, signals ripple outward. Instruments meant to measure faint variations in solar wind now register pulses that coincide with the comet's convulsions. Background starlight bends in ways that hint at unseen currents flowing through the void. It is as though the very fabric of space is straining, reshaping itself around the drama unfolding. Astronomers, though cautious, cannot avoid the language of music. The pattern is too rhythmic, too insistent. Swan fractures in repeating arcs. Atlas pulses in bursts that almost resemble beats. Even the ripples seen near Mars echo in step. The system feels less like a random scattering of events and more like a symphony building toward climax. But a symphony implies design, and design implies intent. If intent lies behind the rhythm, then the questions become sharper. Who conducts such a symphony? What purpose could be served in unraveling fragile wanderers with such precision? And why allow us to witness it at all? If silence were the goal, the comets could have vanished without trace. Instead, their destruction is loud, luminous, impossible to ignore. It is as though the message is not simply for them, but for us as well. And perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the void is not trying to silence, but to signal, not trying to erase, but to emphasize. By breaking comets apart in rhythm, by forcing them into luminous displays, the hidden hand ensures we cannot look away. In their destruction, the wanderers become more visible than they ever were intact. The paradox deepens. To destroy is to reveal. To silence is to speak more loudly. To erase is to leave marks impossible to miss. If that is true, then Swan and Atlas are not victims at all, but participants in a process far larger than themselves. They are messengers, carrying a story written in their very unraveling. And so the world waits. Telescopes across continents point toward Mars's corridor, ready for the crescendo. Every faint pulse, every shimmer of dust, every ripple in the void is logged, cross-checked, plotted, and always the same thought hums at the edges. When the crossing comes, the rhythm may change. And when it does, what will it reveal? For now, the comets hold on. SWAN glows faintly, its torn tail stretched thin against the black. Atlas flickers again, then steadies, then flickers once more, as though unwilling to give in completely. Both fight against forces we cannot name, carrying their luminous scars into the narrowing corridor ahead. Perhaps they will not survive Mars, perhaps they will. But even if they vanish, their story will not. The fragments they scatter, the rhythms they leave behind, will echo long after they are gone. And in those echoes, we may finally hear the truth hidden in the silence of the void. And now the rhythm feels closer than ever, as though each pulse from SWAN and Atlas echoes not only through telescopes, but through the stillness of night itself. Observers describe the feeling as uncanny, a sense that the comets are not distant objects but presences, active participants pressing against our awareness. Their unraveling has become more than data, it has become experience. The fractures multiply. SWAN's tail, once a single luminous ribbon, is now divided into countless strands, like fibers pulled from cloth. Each strand glows faintly in ultraviolet, shimmering as though threaded by invisible hands. Atlas, though battered, still resists. Its bursts of brightness come less frequently now, but when they do, they blaze across instruments with startling clarity, like defiant flares in the dark. Together, their struggle feels choreographed, even if no one dares say so aloud. And then there is Mars. The red planet glows faintly in the background, a silent witness waiting for the crossing. But its silence may not be absolute. Recent data shows subtle changes in its exosphere, tiny fluctuations in temperature and density that align suspiciously well with the comet's convulsions. To dismiss these as coincidence grows harder with every passing hour. Mars seems to hum with the same rhythm, faint but undeniable, a drum echoing the same beat across the void. If resonance can tie planets to comets, then what does that say about the system itself? Are we looking at isolated anomalies, or are we glimpsing a structure woven into the very fabric of space? Some argue that this is evidence of cosmic fields we have never mapped, corridors of force connecting bodies across unimaginable distances. Others whisper more unsettling ideas, that the system itself is alive, that its rhythms are not mechanical but intentional, that we are living inside a structure that observes us as much as we observe it. Such thoughts are difficult to dismiss in the quiet hours when the data settles, when the mind wanders beyond graphs and charts. If the cosmos is alive with rhythm, then SWAN and Atlas are not simply wanderers. They are instruments, and their destruction is not silence but song. But song for whom? The question lingers, unresolved. If this is communication, then we are eavesdropping on a language not meant for us. If it is a test, then we are part of the trial whether we admit it or not. And if it is warning, then perhaps it comes too late to change anything at all. Still, there is wonder in their fragility. To see SWAN's threads stretching across millions of kilometers, to watch Atlas flare defiantly against unseen pressure, is to be reminded that even the most delicate of things can endure longer than expected. Their resilience carries meaning of its own. Perhaps survival, even partial, is the message. Perhaps to resist at all, in the face of forces vast and nameless, is enough. The days shorten between pulses. The rhythm tightens, closing in like footsteps behind us in a corridor. And as the comets inch closer to Mars's path, every eye waits for the inevitable. Will the rhythm shatter them completely at the threshold? Or will fragments slip through, scattering seeds of mystery deeper into the solar system? No one can predict with certainty. Models fail, theories fray, predictions contradict one another. But the anticipation grows nonetheless, because in their unraveling, SWAN and Atlas have done what few comets ever achieve. They have forced us to see the void not as silence, but as a place alive with questions. And perhaps that is their greatest gift. Not survival, not fragments, not even revelation, but the questions they leave behind. Questions that may shape how we see the cosmos long after their light has faded. Night after night, the pattern becomes sharper, like a melody finally coming into focus. SWAN no longer drifts in silence. Its tail flickers in repeating waves that some describe as almost coded. A flicker, pause, too precise to be chance. Atlas answers with its own bursts of brightness, irregular at first glance but always arriving within the same window, as though the two wanderers are locked in conversation across the void. This dialogue cannot be explained away by heat or gravity alone. These are forces astronomers understand, forces that leave predictable fingerprints, but what they are watching now has no precedent. Comets do not coordinate. They do not answer one another across millions of kilometers. And yet the evidence builds. They do. Theories multiply in every corner of science. Plasma physicists suggest that the solar wind is carrying signals, invisible ripples of magnetism linking the comets. Dark matter researchers argue that unseen structures may be guiding their disintegration, filaments so subtle we only notice them when fragile bodies like SWAN and Atlas cross their paths. And still others, unwilling to speak publicly, whisper of something less natural. An ancient mechanism woven into space itself, designed to shape what reaches the inner worlds. If the cosmos filters its own messengers, then we must ask, filtered for whom? Who benefits when comets unravel before they reveal their full stories? Is it a safeguard, protecting planets from material not meant to reach them? Or is it a barrier, a deliberate silence meant to keep knowledge at bay? These are not questions that fit neatly into equations, yet they haunt every chart, every graph. Because the timing is too perfect. The comets unravel in rhythm. Mars hums faintly in sympathy. Even Earth, some suggest, has felt subtle echoes, unexplained disturbances in ionospheric readings, faint anomalies in auroral activity, all too small to prove, but too persistent to ignore. The picture that emerges is not of comets alone, but of a system alive with resonance. The solar system itself may be vibrating, threads pulled by an unseen hand. Every planet and wanderer a participant in a performance we have only just begun to hear. And if that is true, then SWAN and Atlas are not isolated accidents. They are the latest notes in a song that has played for ages, unnoticed until now. Mars draws closer, the threshold tightening with each passing day. The anticipation is almost unbearable. When the comets cross its orbit, will the song crescendo? Will the rhythm break them entirely, scattering them into silence? Or will fragments endure, carrying whispers of the hidden pattern farther inward? And if fragments do endure, what might they carry? Dust, yes, but also isotopes, structures, signatures that do not belong to ordinary ice. Already, faint anomalies hint at something unusual in their composition. If even a trace survives, it could be the key to decoding the rhythm, a fragment of the unseen woven into material we can hold. But survival is far from certain. The pressure increases with each cycle. The pulses grow shorter, sharper, closer together. The unseen hand presses harder as Mars looms larger, as though determined to force an ending before the crossing. Whether that ending is silence or revelation remains the question that grips us all. And perhaps that is the real power of SWAN and Atlas. Not the light they shed, not the fragments they scatter, but the way they force us to confront the possibility that the cosmos is not silent, not neutral, not passive. They have made us listen to rhythms we did not know existed, and once heard, those rhythms cannot be forgotten. The comets drift onward, fragile yet luminous, unraveling but unyielding, carrying their mystery step by step toward Mars. And we, watching, wait for the moment when the rhythm finally declares what it has been building toward all along. Each observation now feels like a countdown, The rhythm that began as faint coincidence has grown into a steady drum, a pattern so undeniable that even the most skeptical voices fall quiet. SWAN fractures again, but not into chaos. Its pieces stream away in evenly spaced arcs, as though cast deliberately. Atlas answers with a flare, brighter this time, its glow persisting just long enough to etch itself across detectors worldwide. Together, they sketch a pattern in light, a duet carved across the black canvas of space. The sense of intention cannot be ignored. Even as astronomers resist words like design, their language betrays them. They speak of echoes, of responses, of resonance. These are not the words of accidents, but of interactions. And if interaction exists, then the hidden storm shaping these comets is not blind. It has form, structure, maybe even purpose. Theories evolve as quickly as the data. Some suggest the rhythm is tied to relic gravitational waves, ancient ripples from cataclysms long past, now brushing through our system and tearing at fragile wanderers as they pass. Others point to magnetic corridors, unseen rivers threading space, capable of pulling dust and ice into synchronized collapse. A smaller group pushes further still. What if these are not natural phenomena at all, but traces of a mechanism older than stars, embedded in the void itself, a filter not of accident, but of architecture? And if it is architecture, then architecture implies an architect. The thought is unsettling, dangerous even, but impossible to dismiss. Who or what would shape the fates of wanderers across systems? For what reason? To shield? To silence? To select? Mars, patient and red, waits for the answer. Its orbit is the stage upon which this performance nears its climax. Already, subtle disturbances ripple across its thin skies, as though the planet itself feels the approaching rhythm. Instruments detect flickers in its ionosphere, whispers of magnetic tremors that align too neatly with the comet's convulsions. Whether Mars is a participant, an amplifier, or simply a resonator, its silence feels charged, as though it is holding its breath. And in that silence, Earth listens too. Our own instruments hum with faint anomalies. Radio static where there should be none, auroral flickers without cause. Small things, easily overlooked, but taken together, they form a troubling picture. If resonance threads through Mars, why not Earth? If SWAN and Atlas are unraveling in tune with the hidden song, perhaps we are already humming along, unaware of the chorus we inhabit. The idea is as terrifying as it is humbling. We have long thought of ourselves as observers of the cosmos, standing apart, watching safely from a distance. But what if we are not observers at all? What if we are part of the performance, subject to the same forces, measured by the same rhythm? If so, then the unraveling of comets is more than spectacle. It is rehearsal, a glimpse of what it means to live within a universe that may not be passive at all, but active, structured, insistent. SWAN and Atlas may be fragile, but they are also teachers, showing us that silence is an illusion and the void is alive with patterns we were blind to until now. Their approach to Mars feels like an answer waiting to be spoken. Will the rhythm crush them entirely, erasing their stories before they pass? Or will fragments endure, scattering across the system like seeds? If fragments survive, they may carry with them not just dust and ice, but traces of the rhythm itself, signatures we can study, pieces of the hidden hand etched into matter. The choice, however, is not ours. We are not the authors of this performance. We are the audience, waiting in silence for the next act. And in that waiting lies both dread and wonder. Because when the crescendo arrives, it will not only decide the fate of SWAN and Atlas, it may decide how we understand the universe itself, as backdrop or as conductor. For now, the comets drift, unraveling but luminous, scarred but persistent, carrying their mystery step by step toward the corridor of Mars. And we, caught in their rhythm, cannot help but follow. The story of SWAN and Atlas is no longer just their own, By now, it has spilled into the wider imagination, seeping beyond data charts and into quiet conversations across observatories, forums, and living rooms. People who have never cared for comets suddenly watch the night sky, aware that something fragile and extraordinary is unfolding there. And still the comets drift, fragile threads woven into a larger rhythm we cannot yet name. The fractures continue, sharper now, more frequent. SWAN trails debris like torn silk unraveling behind it, each strand glowing faintly in the dark. Atlas answers with light that feels less like accident and more like defiance, brief but dazzling flares that resist the silence pressing in. Together, they feel less like wanderers and more like actors, carrying out a performance written long before we began to watch. Mars draws nearer in every calculation, and with it comes the sense of inevitability. The crossing cannot be avoided. Whatever force is unraveling the comets seems to know this too. The pulses grow tighter, the intervals shorter, as if pressing the wanderers toward climax. Each day brings fresh anomalies, new layers of resonance. Mars's exosphere trembles faintly again, whispering in rhythm with the comet's collapse. Background radiation hums with unexplained shifts, echoing the same unseen beat. It is as if the entire solar system has leaned in, listening to the same hidden song. And here, the most daring question rises. What if the rhythm is not meant to destroy, but to awaken? What if the unraveling is not suppression, but initiation, a process meant to strip away what is fragile and reveal what is hidden within? In that light, the breaking of SWAN and Atlas becomes less an erasure and more a transformation. Not silence, but metamorphosis. If that is true, then the fragments scattering across the void may not be accidents, but messages. Each grain of dust, each flare of light may carry signatures of a language older than stars, a language we cannot yet read, but which lingers in the patterns we record night after night. And perhaps that is why the destruction is so luminous, to force us to pay attention, to ensure the message cannot be ignored. Yet this thought is as unsettling as it is inspiring. Because if the cosmos is speaking, then it has chosen a method we barely understand, and a message we may not be equipped to hear. And if we are not ready, then perhaps the fragments will pass us by, drifting into silence while we struggle to grasp what they tried to say. Still, there is something profoundly human about watching fragile wanderers resist forces far greater than themselves. We see ourselves in their struggle, small bodies holding together against vast storms, fragile but luminous, threatened yet still moving forward. Their persistence mirrors our own, the way humanity pushes against uncertainty, searching for meaning in a universe that rarely offers clarity. And so, night after night, we wait. Each new pulse is both dread and hope. Each new fracture is both loss and revelation. The rhythm grows closer, heavier, impossible to ignore. Mars waits like a stage lit in red, silent but ready. And soon, very soon, SWAN and Atlas will cross its threshold. Whatever happens then will not simply end their story, it will reshape ours. Because once we have heard the rhythm, once we have glimpsed the possibility that the void is alive with patterns and purpose, we cannot go back to silence. The universe has revealed itself as more than backdrop. It has revealed itself as voice, and in that voice, however faint, lies a promise that we are not alone in the dark. Now the comets seem less like isolated travelers and more like threads woven into a larger design. SWAN's shattered tail stretches into delicate filaments, weaving faint arcs that glow against the night. Atlas answers with flares that come in uneven bursts, like sparks struck from flint, brilliant for moments before fading again. Together their unraveling feels deliberate, as though every fracture and every pulse were lines in a script too vast for us to read. Observers grow restless with the weight of it. The data is there, charts overflowing with light curves and dust signatures, but the explanations feel hollow. The usual language of physics struggles to capture what is unfolding. Patterns that defy probability are dismissed as coincidence only so many times before coincidence itself begins to feel like denial. Mars waits at the center of all these calculations, its orbit now days away from being crossed. Each new cycle of cometary collapse feels like a drumbeat leading toward that moment. Will the red planet amplify the hidden rhythm, magnifying it into something we cannot miss? Or will it serve as executioner, the place where the storm presses so hard that nothing survives? And always the deeper questions push through. Why reveal this to us now? Why not veil the storm entirely, leaving us in ignorance as countless comets are erased unseen? Instead, we are shown every fracture, every luminous echo, every ripple across the void. It is not silence, but spectacle. It is not concealment, but display. Perhaps this is not meant for us. Perhaps we are eavesdroppers on a conversation meant for others, catching only fragments in translation. Or perhaps it is meant for us, not to comfort, but to confront, to force us to realize that the universe is not neutral ground, but contested space, alive with forces older than our understanding. The resonance grows stronger. Even on Earth, instruments report anomalies too consistent to ignore, faint magnetic twitches, auroras blooming when solar winds are calm, unexplained pulses in radiostatic. Each one alone is easy to dismiss, but together they whisper of connection. If Mars can hum with the comets, perhaps we do too, unknowingly part of the same hidden orchestra. And if that is true, then the comets are not warning us of something far away. They are warning us of something already here, moving through the solar system with patience and precision, measuring wanderers, testing worlds, weaving its rhythm across everything it touches. The weight of that realization presses down with the same inevitability as the approaching crossing. SWAN drifts on, luminous yet tattered, its fragments scattering like seeds across the black. Atlas, scarred but unbroken, flares once more, its light carrying defiance into the dark. And both move closer to Mars, closer to climax, closer to the moment when the rhythm will either claim them completely or let their fragments through. What we are watching may not simply be the death of comets. It may be the unveiling of a truth we have long refused to see, that the void is not empty, that silence is an illusion, and that even in unraveling, there is meaning waiting to be heard. And perhaps that is why we cannot look away. Because what they reveal is not only about comets, not only about Mars, but about ourselves, fragile, luminous, unraveling in our own ways, yet still pressing forward into mysteries larger than we can name. The crescendo nears, and when it arrives, the silence that follows may be louder than anything we have heard before. The closer the comets draw to Mars, the more each observation feels like part of a countdown. Instruments track their progress with precision, but beneath the calculations lies a pulse that no mathematics can quite contain. SWAN's tail now resembles a veil shredded by invisible hands, torn yet luminous, scattering threads of light across millions of kilometers. Atlas, stubborn as ever, flickers in bursts that resist collapse, blazing for moments as if to remind the cosmos that it has not yet yielded. The rhythm holds steady. Each fracture from SWAN is answered by a flare from Atlas. Each flare is followed by a subtle tremor in Mars's atmosphere, as if the planet itself cannot help but respond. The synchronization has become too exact to ignore. Coincidence has given way to choreography, a dance unfolding under the gaze of instruments straining to keep up. And the world watches, caught between awe and dread. For if this is choreography, then someone, or something, is directing it. Natural forces may explain parts of the story, but not the timing, not the echoes, not the way Mars hums in step. It is as though the solar system itself has become a stage, and the comets are actors compelled to perform a script they never chose. The thought is unsettling, but it refuses to be silenced. If there is a hidden conductor behind the rhythm, then every planet, every fragment of dust, every wandering body is part of the same orchestra. And if that is true, then Earth is not audience alone. We are instruments too, even if we cannot yet hear our own part in the song. The implications weigh heavy. What if the unraveling of Swan and Atlas is not unique, but universal? What if countless comets have carried the same burden across ages, breaking apart in the same rhythms, unseen by civilizations too primitive to recognize the pattern? The void may be littered with forgotten performances, echoes of trials we never witnessed. Perhaps only now, with instruments sensitive enough and attention persistent enough, do we finally hear the music that has always been playing. Mars grows larger in their path, its silent orbit no longer passive but charged with expectation. Observers imagine it as a tuning fork, ready to ring with clarity when the comets cross. The planet's faint whispers already hint at resonance, but the true note, the full vibration, may strike only when the wanderers pass within its grasp. And when that moment comes, what then? Will Mars magnify the rhythm until it roars, leaving no doubt that the storm is real, deliberate, alive? Or will the resonance collapse both comets entirely, silencing them before the story can spread inward? The uncertainty is part of the wait, a suspense that makes each passing night feel longer than the last. Even now, fragments drift, glowing faintly as they scatter into the solar wind. They may seem fragile, insignificant, yet within them lie signatures, isotopes, structures, whispers of composition that hint at something beyond ordinary ice and dust. If even a handful of those fragments survive Mars's corridor, they could become keys to unlocking the rhythm, evidence we can touch, matter that speaks in ways light alone cannot. But survival is far from certain. The pulses come faster now, sharper, as though the hidden hand is pressing harder, determined to decide the fate of Swan and Atlas before the crossing. Each observation feels like a note in a rising scale, pushing toward climax. The crescendo is coming, and when it does, the void will speak louder than ever before. Perhaps that is the true revelation, not whether the comets survive, but that the universe itself is capable of voice, that the silence we once believed in was only the pause before the song. Swan and Atlas may unravel, but in their unraveling, they have already given us something that cannot be erased, the knowledge that space is not empty and that we are not alone in its stillness. The rhythm now feels inescapable. Even those who try to dismiss the anomalies as coincidence admit that the timing has become uncanny. Swan sheds another veil of dust, and almost on cue, Atlas brightens in reply. Hours later, Mars's atmosphere flickers faintly, as if struck by a note too low for human ears. The sequence is undeniable. Fracture, flare, resonance. A cycle repeating with precision, a cadence stretching across millions of kilometers. It no longer feels like watching random destruction. It feels like listening to a conversation we cannot translate. Swan speaks in fragments, Atlas answers in light, Mars hums in resonance, and we, listening, are left to wonder whether the message is meant for us at all, or whether we are only intruders hearing half of a dialogue between larger forces. If this is communication, its style is as alien as it is unsettling. Not words, not signals in radio waves, but destruction and persistence, silence and brightness, rhythm and fracture. A language written not in ink but in unraveling. Perhaps that is why it feels so strange. We are accustomed to clarity, to messages crafted to be understood. But the cosmos may not care for our comprehension. Its language may be rhythm itself, a code we can only grasp after watching countless repetitions. And repetition has been relentless. Night after night, the pattern builds, gaining strength as the comets close on Mars. It is as though the universe is reminding us, pay attention, the moment is near. Astronomers, cautious by training, begin to use words that hint at more than physics. They speak of choreography, of resonance, of performance. These are metaphors, yes, but metaphors that carry weight. They betray the truth that even science cannot fully mask. What we are seeing feels intentional. It may not be, but the feeling is there, undeniable, echoing in every flare and fracture. The implications cut deep. If Swan and Atlas are being unraveled as part of a hidden rhythm, then how many other wanderers have carried the same fate? How many comets across eons have broken apart under pressures no one recorded? We may think this moment unique only because we are finally watching closely enough. Perhaps the void has always sung this way, and we are merely the first to listen carefully. And if the void has always sung, then what is its song about? Some argue it is filtration. Only fragments pass through, stripped of secrets, cleansed by forces too ancient to question. Others argue it is revelation, destruction as message, fragments as messengers, scattering truth farther than any intact body could carry. And still others whisper of something older, deeper that cannot yet be named. Mars stands as the stage for the crescendo. Its orbit is the line they cannot avoid, the point where rhythm and resistance will collide. Already, the planet hums faintly in sympathy, its thin air trembling in rhythm with the comet's unraveling. If Mars resonates this strongly now, what will happen when the wanderers pass within its grasp? Will the resonance shatter them entirely, or will it amplify their defiance, scattering fragments that survive? The suspense is unbearable, and yet it binds us to the story. SWAN drifts forward, unraveling but luminous, veils of dust shimmering like torn fabric trailing into infinity. Atlas flickers defiantly, its bursts less frequent but more intense, like the heartbeat of something refusing to give in. Together they carry their mysteries closer to the red planet, closer to the threshold, closer to the truth. And in their struggle, we find reflection. We too are fragile, unraveling in small ways against forces we barely understand. We too resist, flaring with defiance even when silence presses in. Watching them, we glimpse ourselves, small, fragile, but luminous in our persistence. The crescendo nears, and when it comes, it will not simply decide the fate of two comets. It will decide whether we have been witnesses to chaos, or to communication, or to something beyond either word. The silence between each pulse is almost as striking as the pulses themselves. In those gaps, the universe feels heavy with anticipation, as though holding its breath. Then SWAN fractures again, scattering faint arcs of dust, and Atlas answers with a sudden blaze that lingers on detectors for long seconds before fading. Moments later, Mars stirs faintly, its thin atmosphere quivering with an echo so subtle only the most sensitive instruments can register it. The cycle repeats: fracture, flare, resonance, always the same, always building. By now, the pattern has become impossible to dismiss. Even those who cling to natural explanations admit that the timing is uncanny, the precision too sharp to ignore. Random destruction does not keep time like this. Coincidence does not maintain rhythm over days and weeks. Something is guiding the unraveling, though what or why remains hidden. And so the debate deepens. Is this communication? Is it warning? Is it merely an ancient rhythm woven into the fabric of the solar system itself? A heartbeat we have only just learned to hear? Whatever the answer, the sense of intention grows. The universe does not feel empty in these moments. It feels alive, engaged, pressing its rhythm into fragile wanderers that cannot resist. The watchers, spread across observatories and quiet living rooms alike, feel it too. People who have never cared for comets speak of the pattern in hushed tones, as if they too have been drawn into the performance. It is no longer just science, it has become story, and like all stories, it builds toward climax. Mars waits at the center of that climax. The red planet, silent and indifferent for ages, now feels like the stage upon which the final act will play. Already its skies flicker faintly, its magnetic whispers aligning with the comet's convulsions. It does not resist the rhythm, it resonates with it. Some imagine Mars as a tuning fork, ready to ring clearly once the comets cross its orbit. Others picture it as an executioner, waiting to crush what fragile bodies dare enter its domain. Yet even as speculation swirls, one truth becomes clear. The comets are no longer passive. They resist in their own way. SWAN, shredded into strands, glows delicately, scattering veils of light that trail endlessly behind it. Atlas, though battered, continues to flare defiantly, its bursts sharper, brighter, carrying a kind of luminous stubbornness into the void. Together they embody persistence, a refusal to collapse quietly. And in their persistence, humanity finds reflection. We too resist forces larger than ourselves. We too cling to light, even when unraveling seems inevitable. Watching them, we cannot help but feel kinship. Fragile bodies against vast storms, holding together just long enough to leave meaning behind. What meaning, though? That is the question that lingers, heavier with each passing hour. Are SWAN and Atlas warning us of forces beyond our reach? Are they revealing the hidden rhythm of the cosmos? Or are they simply participants in a performance too vast for us to understand? The answers evade us, but the questions themselves feel like revelation. For once we ask them, the universe cannot be silent again. Once we have seen rhythm where we expected chaos, once we have imagined intention where we expected indifference, we cannot return to ignorance. The cosmos feels altered, and so do we. The crescendo nears, and when it arrives, it will decide not only the fate of two fragile comets, but the story we tell about the universe itself. Is it backdrop or voice, silence or song, accident or design? For now, SWAN and Atlas continue their luminous unraveling, moving closer with every beat, every flare, every echo. And we, caught in the rhythm, wait for the moment when the silence breaks and the cosmos speaks its answer. Every flare and fracture now feels heavier, as though the universe itself is tightening the strings of an unseen instrument. SWAN's tail, once a gentle stream, is now a tapestry of torn light, each strand shimmering faintly before dissolving into darkness. Atlas answers with another eruption, sharp and sudden, brighter than expected, as if fueled by something beyond simple chemistry. Then Mars responds, trembling faintly in sympathy, its exosphere vibrating in quiet alignment. The cycle endures, fracture, flare, resonance, a cadence too disciplined to be chaos. By this stage, even the language used by scientists has shifted. No longer is it enough to speak of probabilities and natural forces. Instead, their words bend toward metaphors, choreography, dialogue, rhythm. Observers speak of the comets as though they are performers, their unraveling less destruction than participation in something larger. The hesitation to admit this is telling, the fear that to call it what it feels like is to step into territory too unsettling to face. And yet, the sense of purpose grows impossible to deny. What else explains the timing? What else explains the way Mars, a planet long thought indifferent, hums in step with bodies tearing themselves apart? This is not silence. This is structure. This is message. The question then is who the message is for. Are we meant to witness this, or have we stumbled into the audience by accident, eavesdropping on a performance not intended for us? The thought carries both dread and wonder. If meant for us, then what does it say about the cosmos, that it has chosen to speak now in a language of destruction and defiance? And if not meant for us, then what does it mean that we can hear it at all? Theories fracture almost as rapidly as the comets themselves. Some claim the rhythm is natural, the result of hidden cosmic fields we are only beginning to detect. Others argue it is intentional, an architecture woven into space, filtering which bodies may pass inward. Still others whisper that it is test, that every world, every wanderer is measured by the same cadence, and that survival is less about chance than about resonance with the hidden song. Mars draws nearer in every calculation, its orbit waiting like a threshold. To cross it is to step into the unknown, either to be shattered completely or to emerge transformed. The suspense is unbearable, but it is also magnetic. Humanity has never turned away from thresholds. We watch because we must, because the act of witnessing is its own form of participation, and in that witnessing lies reflection. We begin to see ourselves mirrored in the comets, fragile, unraveling at the edges, yet luminous in defiance. We too flare against silence. We too resist collapse. We too carry mysteries we cannot yet name. Their struggle feels like ours, a reminder that even small bodies can endure longer than expected when pressed by forces far beyond comprehension. The rhythm quickens, each interval shortens. The void itself feels restless, as though preparing to speak in a voice louder than any we have heard. SWAN continues to scatter veils of dust, delicate yet persistent. Atlas continues to blaze, refusing to fade quietly. Together they move closer, step by luminous step, toward Mars's domain, and soon the moment will arrive. The crescendo cannot be delayed. When it comes, the universe will not whisper. It will declare, and what it declares may change how we see everything, not just comets, not just planets, but the very silence we once mistook for emptiness. Because silence, it seems, was never silence at all. It was only the pause before the song. The rhythm tightens, like footsteps quickening in a long corridor. SWAN unravels further, its fragments scattering in graceful arcs, each glowing faintly before vanishing into the dark. Atlas refuses to dim quietly, bursting instead with flashes that seem almost desperate, each one brighter, sharper, timed as though it were an answer to some unspoken call. And then, almost predictably, Mars shivers again, its exosphere humming in resonance, a faint reply that makes the entire cycle feel like dialogue. Observers can no longer frame this as accident. The precision is relentless. Fracture, flare, resonance, over and over, with intervals too consistent to dismiss. The comets are not just unraveling, they are participating. They are woven into a rhythm older than themselves, older perhaps than the planets that now respond to their collapse. If this is choreography, then what is its purpose? If this is a performance, then who is meant to see it? Humanity has stumbled into the audience, that much is clear. But whether the show was staged for us, or whether we have intruded on something never meant to be witnessed, is a question without answer. And the not knowing gnaws at us, even as we lean closer, unable to look away. Theories grow wilder with every passing night. Some insist the rhythm is natural, a product of hidden forces threading through the solar system. Others whisper of intentional design, an architecture so ancient it now feels like background noise, unnoticed until fragile bodies like SWAN and Atlas pass through its grasp. And then there are those who speak of test, that everything which drifts inward is measured, judged, broken, or allowed to continue, depending on how well it resonates with the unseen song. The test theory carries a particular weight. Because if the comets are being measured, then perhaps worlds are too. Perhaps planets themselves, Mars, Earth, all of them, hum faintly in resonance, revealing whether they belong within the rhythm or outside of it. The thought is unsettling. It suggests that survival in this system is not simply a matter of physics, but of harmony. That what endures does so not only because it resists, but because it participates. Mars, glowing faintly red in the distance, becomes more than a stage. It becomes the gatekeeper, the point at which the rhythm will declare its decision. Will SWAN and Atlas survive in fragments, scattering seeds of resonance deeper into the system? Or will they be erased completely, their performance ending at the threshold? No one can say. The instruments measure, the models predict, but the rhythm obeys no calculation. The weight of uncertainty is immense, but it binds us to the moment. Humanity has always watched thresholds. We cannot turn away from doors about to open, even when we fear what lies beyond. And so we wait, our telescopes trained, our data streaming, our imaginations restless. In the waiting, we find ourselves reflected again. We too unravel at times, fragile against storms far larger than us. We too flare in moments of defiance, luminous for brief instants that push back against silence. And we too move toward thresholds we cannot avoid, uncertain what lies beyond. Swan and Atlas are not only wanderers, they are mirrors showing us pieces of ourselves written in dust and light. The crescendo is near, the rhythm is faster, sharper, undeniable. Soon the crossing will come, and with it the moment of truth. Whether silence or revelation follows, it will echo far longer than the comets themselves. Because whatever unfolds at Mars will not only decide the fate of Swan and Atlas, it will decide the story we tell about the universe itself, whether it is chaos or communication, whether it is indifferent or alive. And perhaps in that story we will decide something about ourselves as well. The rhythm no longer whispers, it presses. Each new cycle feels heavier, closer, as though the entire solar system is leaning toward the moment of collision. Swan's threads drift wider, scattering like luminous seeds across the dark, delicate yet strangely deliberate in their arrangement. Atlas, battered but unbroken, erupts again, light spilling outward in a burst that refuses to fade quickly, and once more, Mars trembles faintly in response, the planet humming with an echo too exact to be dismissed as chance. The cadence holds, fracture, flare, resonance, over and over, now almost urgent. What once felt like a quiet performance has become something more insistent, a demand written in dust and light. The question is no longer whether there is rhythm, it is undeniable. The question is what it means. If this is communication, then what is being said? Are we witnessing warning or invitation? Is the cosmos trying to tell us that nothing survives unchanged when it nears the inner worlds? Or is it revealing that survival is possible only through transformation, that unraveling is the doorway to continuation? Theories divide observers. Some cling to natural explanations, magnetic corridors, plasma waves, unseen gravitational echoes. Others step further, speaking of architecture, of design woven into the system itself, a mechanism not built to comfort or destroy but to measure, a filter that decides what passes inward and what ends here. And among them, the quietest voices whisper of something stranger still, that this rhythm is not only cosmic, but conscious. The thought is difficult to dismiss. Swan and Atlas do not unravel in chaos, they unravel in time, as though answering questions we cannot hear. Each flare, each fracture, each tremor in Mars's skies feels like a syllable in a language too vast for us to read. The cosmos does not speak in words, but in cadence, and we, listening, are left to wonder whether we have just begun to hear it for the first time. Mars becomes less a planet and more a threshold with each passing night. Its orbit feels charged, as if waiting to release a note held too long. Will it amplify the rhythm into a crescendo that shatters both comets completely? Or will it transform them, scattering fragments that survive and carry traces of the hidden song farther inward? The suspense binds us, but it also changes us. Humanity has always looked outward for meaning, but never before has the void spoken in this way. Watching Swan's luminous strands trail into infinity and Atlas's bursts flare defiantly against silence, we cannot help but see ourselves reflected, fragile, unraveling, yet luminous. Small bodies resisting forces far larger than themselves, and in their persistence, we recognize our own. Perhaps that is the gift the comets offer, even before their crossing. They remind us that fragility does not mean insignificance, that even in unraveling there is light, that resistance itself carries meaning even when the outcome is unknown. The rhythm grows faster, each cycle shorter. The silence between pulses narrows until it feels like a drumbeat pressing into the very fabric of space. Soon the comets will cross Mars's path. Soon the rhythm will declare its verdict. And when it does, the silence that follows may not be silence at all. It may be revelation. Because once heard, rhythm cannot be forgotten. Once seen, intention cannot be unseen. Swan and Atlas may not survive intact, but in their unraveling they have already given us something permanent, the knowledge that the cosmos does not sleep. It speaks, it measures, it sings. And we, for the first time, are listening. The sky feels heavy with expectation. Even though the comets are millions of kilometers away, their unraveling has become part of our nights, part of our imaginations. Each flare from Atlas feels like a spark on the edge of our vision. Each thread shed by Swan glows faintly in our minds long after it dissolves in space. The cadence has moved beyond the telescopes. It resonates inside us. Fracture, flare, resonance, always the same, always building. Swan disintegrates with elegance, veils of dust drifting outward in ribbons too precise to dismiss. Atlas answers with sudden bursts, violent and luminous, as if declaring itself against the pressure that tears at it. And Mars, steady and silent, quivers in step, its atmosphere responding in whispers invisible to the eye, but undeniable to the instruments that watch. The pattern no longer feels like a question. It feels like a sentence waiting to be completed. The rhythm presses closer, faster, each cycle shorter, the silence between pulses almost gone. If this is communication, then the climax is near. If it is judgment, then the verdict is about to be spoken. Theories grow more daring. Some argue we are not watching destruction at all, but translation. The comets breaking apart, not to vanish, but to reveal. Each fragment is a syllable, each flare a word, each resonance a punctuation mark. Taken together, they form a story too large for us to read all at once. Others argue we are watching filtration, that only what resonates with the rhythm survives to move inward, while all else is stripped away. Both explanations circle the same unsettling idea, that this is not random and never was. And so the watchers lean closer, unable to turn away. The spectacle has become more than science. It is myth unfolding in real time. Swan becomes a symbol of delicate persistence, unraveling but luminous, scattering threads of beauty even in collapse. Atlas becomes the emblem of defiance, bursting with light that refuses silence, insisting on being seen. Together, they embody fragility and resistance, carrying both toward the same inevitable crossing. Mars waits like a stage bathed in red light, its orbit the line neither comet can avoid. Already it hums faintly in time, like a string plucked before the song reaches its peak. What note will it strike when the comets arrive? Will it magnify the rhythm into a crescendo that erases them entirely? Or will it amplify their defiance, scattering fragments that survive and carry traces of the hidden cadence deeper into the system? The suspense is almost unbearable, and yet it binds us to the story more tightly than ever. For in watching, we participate. In listening, we join the rhythm. The comets may be the actors, but humanity has become part of the audience. And perhaps part of the orchestra too, resonating faintly without even realizing it. The approach cannot be stopped. The rhythm has no pause. Swan drifts forward, luminous threads trailing like torn silk across the void. Atlas surges again, bright as a flare in the darkness, its light cutting briefly but brilliantly through the silence. Mars glows faintly ahead, patient, inevitable, waiting to decide the next act. And we, suspended in anticipation, know that when the moment comes, it will change more than the comets. It will change us. Because once the rhythm declares itself, once the silence breaks, the cosmos will not seem empty again. It will seem alive, insistent, unignorable. The crescendo nears, and when it arrives, the universe will not whisper. It will speak. The cadence presses on, each beat sharper than the last. By now, the rhythm feels less like coincidence and more like inevitability, a tide that cannot be stopped. SWAN drifts in tatters, its tail unraveling into countless glowing filaments that trail across the dark like luminous handwriting. Atlas bursts again, another flare of brilliance against the silence, a refusal to fade quietly. And, as if compelled, Mars hums faintly once more, its thin skies vibrating in lockstep with the comet's unraveling. Fracture, flare, resonance. The pattern repeats like clockwork, as though the entire system has fallen into step. It is no longer simply spectacle. It has become proclamation. Something is being said through dust and light, though the language is not ours. If it is translation, then we are reading fragments of a story too immense to comprehend. Each fracture is a syllable, each flare a phrase, each resonance punctuation at the end of a thought. The tale may be older than the planets themselves, carried by wanderers across epochs, waiting for the moment when someone might finally listen. If it is filtration, then the comets are test subjects, measured against the hidden cadence to determine whether they may continue inward. And if it is judgment, then the verdict is imminent. The watchers cannot agree, but agreement is no longer the point. The act of watching itself has become part of the rhythm. Humanity has never stared so intently at two fragile wanderers. The comets have become mirrors, reflecting not only the mysteries of the cosmos, but the persistence of our own curiosity. And what persistence it is. Night after night, the data streams in. SWAN's delicate filaments traced, Atlas's stubborn flares catalogued, Mars's faint tremors recorded. The rhythm grows undeniable. Even skeptics now speak of choreography, of alignment, of intention, not because they believe in architects or hidden hands, but because the language of chaos no longer fits what they see. Mars looms larger in calculations, its orbit now so near that anticipation becomes almost unbearable. The red planet glows faintly in the distance, silent yet charged, like an instrument about to strike its note. Will it amplify the cadence until the comets are obliterated completely? Or will it allow fragments to slip through, scattering their mysteries deeper into the solar system? The comets press on, unwilling participants in a performance too vast to escape. Yet in their unraveling, they do not vanish into insignificance. SWAN, torn and fragile, leaves luminous trails that outshine its own body. Atlas, battered but unyielding, continues to blaze defiantly, each flare brighter than the last. Together they teach us something we had forgotten, that fragility can be luminous, that resistance itself is meaning, and in that lesson lies reflection. We too are fragile, threatened by forces beyond comprehension. We too unravel at the edges, yet we too flare, luminous in our persistence, carrying meaning forward even when outcomes are uncertain. Watching the comets, we recognize ourselves, small yet luminous, fragile yet refusing silence. The crescendo cannot be delayed much longer. The rhythm is relentless, the silence between pulses all but gone. SWAN and Atlas approach Mars like notes racing toward the final measure of a song. When they cross, the universe will speak. Whether that voice declares chaos, communication, or something else entirely, it will not leave us unchanged. Once heard, rhythm cannot be forgotten. Once seen, intention cannot be unseen. SWAN and Atlas may not survive intact, but their story already has, written now in us, in the way we will never again mistake silence for emptiness. and soon the final act will begin. The final measures of the rhythm draw near, and the cosmos feels heavy with anticipation. Every telescope pointed outward, every recording device humming in silence, waits for the crossing. SWAN, fragile and veiled, drifts forward, shedding ribbons of light that shimmer like fading script against the night. Atlas, scarred but unyielding, answers once more with a flare so bright it lingers long after on detectors, as though burning its defiance into memory. And Mars, patient and red, hums again in resonance, steady, deliberate, unignorable. Fracture, flare, resonance. The cadence is inescapable. It has become the heartbeat of the system, an invisible drum that binds comets and planets alike. To deny it now would be to deny what the instruments plainly show, that the void is not empty, that silence is not silence at all. The watchers grow quiet in the face of it. Debate still rumbles, but beneath the words lies something deeper. Awe. If this is natural, then it is natural beyond our comprehension. If it is architecture, then it is architecture grand enough to outlive stars. If it is communication, then it is a language that speaks through destruction and persistence, written not for clarity, but for endurance. Whatever it is, it has made us listen, and listening has changed us. Theories tangle and overlap. Translation, filtration, judgment, initiation. Each finds evidence in the comet's collapse. Each feels plausible in its own way. Perhaps they are not separate theories at all, but pieces of the same truth. Perhaps the unraveling is translation and filtration, judgment and initiation, all at once. A process so vast that it cannot be captured in one word, only in rhythm. Mars grows brighter in the dark, its orbit now a line the comets cannot avoid. It feels less like a planet and more like a verdict waiting to be spoken. Will it amplify the cadence until SWAN and Atlas dissolve completely, their light snuffed into silence? Or will it scatter fragments that carry the rhythm onward, seeding its mystery deeper into the solar system? The suspense is unbearable, but it is also magnetic. Humanity has always been drawn to thresholds, and this is a threshold unlike any we have seen. Yet even before the climax, the comets have already given us something lasting. SWAN, though shredded, leaves beauty in its unraveling, a reminder that even collapse can scatter meaning. Atlas, though battered, refuses silence, each flare a testament to persistence. In their luminous struggle, they mirror our own, fragile but radiant, small but unwilling to disappear quietly. The crescendo builds. The rhythm shortens, pulses pressing closer together, like footsteps racing toward a door. Soon the crossing will come, soon the verdict will be declared. And when it does, it will not only decide the fate of two fragile comets, it will decide the story we tell about the universe itself. Because if silence was always song, then the cosmos is not backdrop, but voice. And once that voice is heard, we cannot go back to believing in emptiness. The comets drift onward, luminous against the vast black, carrying their mystery step by step toward Mars. And we, watching, feel the rhythm echo inside us. The story has already changed us. The verdict will only confirm what we now suspect, that we were never alone in the stillness, that the void has always been alive. The pause before the song is over. The note is about to strike. The universe feels wound like a spring. Every observation tightens the coil, every flare and fracture pulling us closer to release. SWAN's delicate strands scatter farther now, drifting into filaments so fine they dissolve into the dark before they can be traced. Yet even in fragility, they shine, thin threads glimmering like faint handwriting across the night. Atlas, weary yet defiant, erupts again, its blaze sharper than before, as though pouring every last reserve into the fight. And inevitably, Mars stirs in resonance, its exosphere whispering faint echoes that confirm what we already know. The cadence continues. Fracture, flare, resonance, always the same, now quicker, like a drumbeat pressed to the edge of breaking. The rhythm no longer feels like performance alone. It feels like declaration. Something is about to be revealed, something too immense to remain hidden much longer. Theories struggle to keep pace with the mounting urgency. Some argue that we are watching initiation, the comets being stripped of what is unnecessary so that what is essential may pass inward. Others insist on filtration, that the universe protects its inner sanctum, allowing only fragments that resonate with its hidden song to enter. Still others lean toward translation, each collapse a phrase in a cosmic sentence, a message spoken not to us but through us. And yet, for all the speculation, the truth may be simpler or more profound. Perhaps unraveling itself is the message. Perhaps the lesson is that fragility can still radiate meaning, that collapse can scatter beauty, that endurance lies not in remaining whole, but in leaving light behind. If so, Swan and Atlas have already succeeded. Swan's veils of dust glow with a kind of melancholy elegance, luminous even in disintegration. Atlas, scarred but persistent, refuses silence, flaring defiantly as though daring the void to erase it. Their persistence speaks of resilience, of light carried forward even in defeat. Mars waits like an instrument poised to strike. Observers imagine the moment when the comets cross its orbit, when resonance reaches full strength. Will Mars sing loudly, amplifying the rhythm into something undeniable? Or will it absorb the cadence silently, leaving us with only questions and fragments? Either way, the threshold looms. The waiting cannot last. And in that waiting, humanity sees itself reflected again. We too unravel, pulled apart by forces larger than we can name. We too resist, flaring briefly but brilliantly, unwilling to vanish without a trace. Watching the comets, we see not just wanderers, but mirrors, fragile, luminous, defiant. They remind us that meaning does not depend on survival alone. It can be carried in fragments, in echoes, in questions left behind. The cadence shortens further. Silence between pulses is almost gone, leaving only a rising drumbeat that shakes imagination as much as instruments. The performance nears climax. The song is about to strike its final note, and whatever that note reveals, it will not vanish quickly. Whether it silences Swan and Atlas forever or scatters their fragments deeper into the system, it will echo across us. The void is no longer silent, and we can no longer be indifferent. The comets drift onward, luminous but fragile, carrying with them the certainty that the universe is alive with rhythm. We wait, and in the waiting, we already know silence has ended. The cosmos speaks, and we are listening. Continues. The night sky feels taut, as though the entire system is holding its breath. Every flare, every fracture, every whisper from Mars adds weight to the silence between beats, a silence now so brief it feels more like anticipation than absence. Swan, unraveling in fragile strands, still glows faintly, scattering dust across the void like sparks from a dying fire. Atlas, battered but relentless, erupts once more, its brilliance cutting defiantly into the dark, and Mars, waiting like a stage drenched in red, hums again in faint resonance, the steady echo that completes the cycle. Fracture, flare, resonance. The cadence endures, sharper now, relentless, no longer gentle performance but urgent declaration. Something presses toward revelation, and every eye turned skyward knows the climax is near. Theories scramble to explain what unfolds before us. Translation, each fragment and flare a phrase, each resonance a word spoken in a language older than stars. Filtration, the comets tested against the hidden cadence, their fates sealed by whether they resonate with the cosmic song. Initiation, destruction as transformation, collapse as doorway, unraveling as passage into something new. Judgment, verdict spoken in rhythm, deciding not only the comets but perhaps every body that drifts within reach. Perhaps all are true at once. Perhaps none are. The uncertainty is unbearable, but it is also the point. The rhythm resists clarity, demanding we feel it more than we understand it. For what greater way to remind us that the universe is alive than to make us listen without translation? And still the comets persist. SWAN, though shredded into strands, drapes the night with veils of light so delicate they seem painted across the dark. Atlas, though torn by invisible pressure, refuses silence, bursting defiantly again and again as if determined to leave its mark. They do not vanish into insignificance. They leave trails, they leave echoes, they leave questions that will not fade. Mars draws closer in every calculation, its orbit waiting like a line etched in fire. The suspense thickens with each passing hour. Will the comets survive in fragments, scattering seeds of rhythm inward? Or will they vanish completely, their final act consumed by resonance too powerful to resist? The outcome lies beyond prediction but not beyond wonder, and in the wonder we glimpse ourselves again. Fragile but luminous, threatened but persistent, small against forces vast and nameless, yet unwilling to surrender without leaving light behind. SWAN and Atlas remind us that even in collapse meaning can scatter farther than survival, that resistance itself can echo long after silence claims the stage. The cadence shortens further still. The silence between pulses has nearly disappeared, leaving only a rising drumbeat that feels less like observation and more like demand. The universe is no longer performing gently at the edge of perception. It is pressing its rhythm directly upon us, urging us to acknowledge that the void is not empty, it is alive. The crescendo is imminent. Soon the rhythm will strike its loudest note. Soon Mars will either amplify or silence the comets forever. And when that moment comes, it will not simply decide their fate. It will reshape our story of the cosmos itself, because once heard, this rhythm cannot be forgotten. Once felt, it cannot be denied. We have already crossed the threshold. The universe has spoken, and we are listening. The rhythm is almost unbearable now. It presses into every observation, every thought, like a drumbeat reverberating through the bones of the system. SWAN, now barely more than luminous strands, continues to scatter its dust into the void, faint, delicate filaments stretching farther than seems possible. Atlas, still defiant, bursts again, brighter than before, as though determined to remind us that even at the edge of collapse, it carries light worth remembering. And Mars, red and patient, hums with resonance that is no longer faint. Its thin atmosphere trembles audibly in data streams, a clear reply in the cadence. Fracture, flare, resonance, no silence between them now. The song has quickened, the pause is gone. The cosmos has shifted from suggestion to declaration, from hint to command. The watchers know what it means. The crescendo has arrived. This is no longer the quiet unraveling of fragile wanderers. This is performance at full volume. The universe is no longer whispering, it is speaking, loudly, insistently, in a language that is rhythm itself. The question is whether we are ready to hear it. Theories collapse into awe. Translation, filtration, judgment, none alone is sufficient. Perhaps it is all of them, a process too vast for one word to contain. Perhaps SWAN and Atlas are not being destroyed but rewritten. They're unraveling a transformation designed to echo beyond their fragile forms. Each fragment scattered is both ending and continuation, each flare both death cry and declaration, each resonance both verdict and invitation. Mars looms larger in every projection, its orbit the threshold that can no longer be delayed. When the comets cross, the resonance will reach its peak. The red planet has already shown its readiness, vibrating in sympathy with every cycle. What note will it strike when the wanderers pass? Will it amplify the rhythm until the comets are erased completely, vanishing into silence? Or will it scatter their fragments like seeds, carrying their luminous questions deeper into the solar system? We cannot know, but perhaps knowing is not the point. Perhaps the gift of Swan and Atlas is not certainty, but wonder, the recognition that the cosmos is not empty, that silence was never silence, that even in unraveling, meaning can endure. And so the watchers wait, instruments hum, telescopes track, imaginations stretch. Humanity holds its breath as two fragile wanderers approach their threshold. And in the waiting, we realize the story has already changed us. We no longer believe in silence. We no longer mistake emptiness for absence. The cosmos has revealed its rhythm, and in hearing it, we are altered. Swan and Atlas drift closer, fragile but luminous, unraveling but radiant, each step nearer to the crossing. The rhythm presses harder, louder, insistent. The crescendo is here, and when the final note strikes, it will echo across more than the comets. It will echo across us. The cadence can no longer be separated into parts. Fracture, flare, resonance. They collapse into one continuous note that shakes the imagination. Swan, unraveling into near nothing, still leaves its luminous handwriting across the void, its dust scattering outward in ribbons that seem to spell persistence itself. Atlas, battered and broken, refuses silence even now, bursting one last time with brilliance so fierce it lingers in detectors long after the flare has ended. And Mars, glowing red and patient, resonates fully now, its thin skies vibrating as though the planet itself has become an instrument of the song. The crescendo has arrived, the watchers fall silent, though silence is no longer possible. Every telescope, every satellite, every quiet room where someone listens feels the rhythm pressing. It is not gentle, not subtle, it is declaration. The theories we clung to falter in the face of this moment. Translation, filtration, judgment, initiation, they blur together, fragments of something larger, each word a shard of a truth too vast to hold. Perhaps the comets were never meant to fit neatly into our explanations. Perhaps they were meant to shatter them, forcing us to see that the universe does not bend to our categories. It speaks its own language, and tonight it speaks clearly. Rhythm is existence, collapse is transformation, silence is never empty. Swan disintegrates further, scattering luminous fragments across the void. They drift, glimmering faintly, not vanishing but continuing in new forms, a persistence that outlives fragility. Atlas burns in defiance, its final blaze carving a line into the dark, a refusal to vanish unnoticed. Together, they become more than comets. They become lessons written in dust and fire. Mars, steady in its orbit, receives them. The resonance peaks, the hum rising until instruments can no longer chart its shape. And then, release. Not silence, but transformation. The rhythm disperses, carried outward on the fragments of Swan and the flares of Atlas, seeding the cosmos with a cadence that will not fade. The watchers breathe again, though nothing feels the same. The spectacle is over, but the resonance lingers. It lingers in the instruments, in the data streams, in the memory of every eye that saw, every ear that listened. The comets may be gone, but their story remains. And it is not a story of destruction. It is a story of persistence. Swan unraveled, but left beauty in its unraveling. Atlas collapsed, but blazed defiantly to the end. Mars received them, and in doing so, revealed that even planets can resonate, that even silence can sing. The verdict, if there was one, is not condemnation, it is reminder. That fragility can endure through resonance, that collapse can scatter meaning farther than survival, that the cosmos is not a void, but a voice, and that voice is never still. We return to our lives changed. The night sky looks different now, not because the stars have moved, but because we have. We know, in a way we cannot unknow, that the universe speaks, and we are part of its song. The crescendo fades, but the echo endures. And in that echo lies the truth Swan and Atlas carried, that silence was never silence, and the cosmos has always been alive. And so the story closes, not with finality, but with resonance, a note that continues long after the song ends. For the universe does not whisper once, it whispers always, and tonight we heard it clearly.